Hello, I hope all of you are doing well. My name is Shriya Bansal and I'm currently working as a software engineer at Microsoft, and I'm also an educator at Level. So now in this video, this will be our very first video where we will start our discussion for SQLs. So first we'll take a quick overview for what SQL is, and then we'll make our way forward. Okay, so when we talk about SQL, let's first answer the question, what is SQL? What is SQL? So SQL is a database language that is designed for the retrieval and management of data in a relational database. Okay, so a few important things to understand over here. Whenever you're using SQL, it is a language, right? It is a query language that you can use to query relational databases. Okay, so we use SQL only for relational databases. Okay, and what does it help for? It basically helps for the retrieval and the management of data in an optimized manner. Okay, now SQL is actually the standard language for DBMS, okay, or database management. All the RDBMS systems like MySQL, MS Access, Oracle, Sybase, Postgres, and SQL Server actually use SQL as their standard database language. So for actually accessing all the RDBMS systems, right, what are RDBMS systems? It could be MySQL, it could be MS Access, right, and many more. There are a lot of query languages available, but SQL is that language which is considered as the standard language for accessing data in these RDBMS systems. So SQL as a programming language basically uses various commands for different operations. Okay, so SQL as a language can actually be classified, or the commands that you actually use in SQL can be classified under various operations. Okay, so there's like a classification. So we have DCL command, TCL, DQL, DDL, and DML commands which are used in SQL. Okay. Just to quickly reiterate, SQL is structured query language. So it is a database language used to manage, used to retrieve, used to update the databases, relational databases, and hence relational database management systems. And SQL basically acts as a primary or standard language for these RDBMS systems. Okay. Next is, why to use SQL, right? What is the reason that we have to use SQL? A few important reasons for choosing SQL is that, first of all, it helps users to access the data, right? All in all, we have been talking about this since long, that if a data is stored in RDBMS, it is not directly available for you to retrieve, right? You have to use a structured query language, right? A basically query language in order to access the data present in RDBMS systems. So SQL basically as a language help users to access the data in the RDBMS systems. Okay, then it also helps you to describe the data. That means not only can you access the data, but you can manage and store or describe also what kind of data will be stored in these systems. Then it allows you to define the data in a database and manipulate that specific data. Pretty much the previous point as before, right? You can define, right, what kind of data are you going to store, and you can manipulate the data also which you are storing in the RDBMS systems using SQL. Next is that with the help of SQL commands in DBMS, you can create and drop databases and tables. So SQL, like I said, provides a wide variety of commands, and using those commands, not only can you manipulate the data present inside the tables, you can also manipulate the entire table and the entire databases, where you can create new databases, you can delete databases, you can create tables, and you can delete tables as well. So SQL again offers you to use the functions in a database, let's say create a view and stored procedure. So using databases based on your use case, you can create a view in which what kind of columns and what kind of rows do you really want to see. So it allows you to create different views for a database as well. And then using SQL, you can actually set permissions on table, procedures, and views, right? So not only do you want to make sure that the access and the manipulation of data is possible, using the query languages, you also want to ensure that the data that you have, you can set some permissions as well. For example, if you have a school system, right, the payments, right, and the fees for the students, their payment information, you just want to be able to, let's say the principal get access to that. If it's a trainee teacher or if it's a new teacher or any specific subject teacher, they should not be able to see the data stored for the payments for every student. So you don't really want to see that particular information. So to set those particular permissions onto who can actually access what kind of tables, procedures and views, using SQL language, you can also set all those kinds of rules as well. Next is, what are the different types of queries, right? What is the classification of queries that can be done using SQL? Okay, so for that, we have 5 classification. First is data definition language. Okay, that means you're trying to define the data, right? You're going to define what kind of tables you have, what kind of columns will they keep, what kind of databases you have. That is what is meant by DDL. Then we talk about DML. Let's say you want to manipulate the data, you want to do some manipulations on top of it. For that, you use the DML queries. Next, we have the data control language, right? For example, let's say you want to control the data, right? You have stored some data, right? And basically you want to control what kind of access to the data is possible. That's data control. Let's say you want to provide some access to some data, you want to revoke some access to the data. All that can be done using data control language. Then we have is transaction control language. When we talk about transaction control language, it is basically, these commands are basically used to check on other commands, right? And to see how do they affect their database. Okay, these commands are basically used for annual changes. Let's say you have a certain set of commands that you execute, let's say annually or quarterly, right? So a set of commands that you actually execute is nothing but what a transaction is. Sometimes you want to commit the transaction, let's say you want to revoke the entire transaction. So transaction control languages are queries used for that. Then we have data query language. Now in data query language, you just want to query some information. Let's say you want to see the list of all the students. Let's say you just want to see the students who have paid their fees, or you just want to query those students who have not paid their fees. So this kind of querying, right, asking questions, fetching information is what we do in SQL. And these are all the 5 wide variety of queries that you can perform on our DBMS systems using SQL. And here is a very beautiful diagram of what all commands do we have shown as well. So for DDL, we have the create command to, let's say, create tables and databases. We have the drop command to drop databases and tables. We want to alter or make some changes to the databases or table, or we have to truncate, right? We have to just delete the entire data in the existing in the table, right? So we'll talk about all of them in great detail. DDL was data definition language. Then we have data control language. That means we want to control the data. We want to control the access to the data. So for that we have the commands grant and revoke. DML. Okay. DML is basically for manipulation of the data. Do we want to insert something in the data? Do we want to update a table or like a database? Do we want to delete some row in a table or a database? TCL is transaction control language. It's like a set of SQL commands that either I want to commit, or I want to roll back, or I just want to have save point. We'll talk about save point as well. Then is DQL, where you just want to query. So you want to select a particular set of rows. DQL might look like, like as one simple command, but it's actually way more complex as well, because a lot of operations can be done on DQL. And DQL is actually one of the most popularly used commands as well, because you want to be able to get access to the data based on the filters that you apply. So basically DQL comes in very handy for that. Okay, I would recommend everyone to stop the video for a minute here as well and just take a look at all these commands. Although we are going to go in detail about this, but it's always good to know the bigger picture as well, right? How in the bigger picture all of this data will basically be, or all of these commands fall under which category. Okay, so that is what pretty much the SQL commands are for. Now in the next set of videos, we are going to pick one of the commands each of the commands one by one and try to, do a hands-on practice where we are going to do this. I would recommend to take the most benefit over here. You already have SQL handy, okay? So that MySQL server is running for you. I'm sure by this time you must have watched some videos online in order to actually, set up a SQL server. If not, please make sure you do that, because the next set of videos will involve having access to the MySQL server so that you can execute queries on top of it. Okay, so this is what pretty much the introduction about SQL includes. Let's do a quick revisit as well on what we all discussed. So SQL, it's a database language. It is used to query the database, retrieve the databases in the database, or the management of a data. It's the standard language for almost all the RDBMS systems like MySQL, MS Access, Oracle, and all. MySQL, if you remember in the DBMS classes, MySQL is actually an open source RDBMS system available. So in our classes, we are going to use MySQL as the RDBMS as well. And to query MySQL database systems, we are going to use SQL. Okay, so SQL and MySQL is going to be choice for the future classes. And SQL, as we just saw, includes a wide variety of commands that can be executed using SQL. Right? The next is the discussion where we answered the question, why do we really need SQL? Right? So SQL basically helps you to get access to the data in the RDBMS systems. It also helps you to describe the data, right? What kind of data will be stored? What will be the schema of the data? What will be the schema of the database? What will be the schema of the tables? And all into that. Then we also use MySQL because it allows you to manipulate the data and not just define the data. Okay, with using SQL commands, you can create databases, you can delete databases, you can create tables, you can delete tables. Apart from that, SQL also offers you to use different functions in a database to create as many views and whatever kind of view you like. And also, if you want to set some permissions, you want to just give restricted access to certain tables or certain views, SQL provides the capability for that. Okay, these are the 5 types of commands that we discussed. Data definition language is to define the data, define the structure of the data stored in the databases. Manipulation is when you want to add something, delete something, right? Or do you want to update something. Data control means that you want to control the access to the data to certain set of users. Transaction control is like a set of SQL commands that you probably, let's say, execute on an annual basis or like a bi-weekly basis, and there are certain ways to do that. Whether you want to commit the transaction, all set of SQL commands, do you want to roll back, or do you want to do save point? Along with that, we also have data query languages. When we talk about data query languages, in terms of querying, what we talk about is the fact that how can we query the databases, how we can write the right set of commands in order to fetch the information from the databases. So that is what all in a high level overview is about all the SQL commands that we have. And here we just kind of saw for all the 5 typical type of queries that can be executed, what are the individual commands. Now the next step after this would be to have a detailed discussion on all these SQL commands one by one, right? We are going to look at all of them in great detail and a lot more than this as well actually, in order to fully understand what SQL commands are basically for and how effective or ineffective probably they are. Okay, so I would recommend to everyone have the SQL handy after this video so that you can make the most benefit. And I hope this part is also clear so far for about SQL. It's a little bit theoretical part, but it's always good to know the higher picture and the bigger picture as well when you drill down into smaller aspects. Okay. So thank you so much for attending this video. I hope this is absolutely clear to everyone. And now would be the next section that we'll include for DDL commands, which is going to be extremely interesting. All right. Thank you so much, and I will see you in the next video.